Today is Friday, and we have an unplanned live Q&A. We wanted to go yesterday, but we didn't have a chance to do it because we had a conflict in our calendar, and that's why we moved the live Q&A to Friday. So welcome everyone. I see we have people piling in. We have 5 people watching so far, and maybe there are more people who will be attending this live Q&A. So let's just wait for them. Write in the chat where you're watching from, and we'll give it a little more time. Alicia, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Igor. Thank you for hosting. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a quiet month. It's now officially an entire month since the last Express Entry round of invitations. So I guess we can flip over, Igor, and take a look at, that screen that's been up for 30 days now. The last round of invitations was August 15th. And so basically nothing since that no program specified draw. There haven't been any new of the category based draws. There haven't been any PNP only draws. It's been complete radio silence from IRCC for an entire month, which I don't know. It doesn't seem to be a good development. I'm not sure what's going on in the background, but I guess the only good piece of news that I can give is I've had a number of clients reach out to me and say that their applications for permanent residence under Express Entry that were filed a few months ago are all being approved. And so that's actually fantastic news. There are a few people who had processing times of about 4 months. There's one client that contacted me yesterday who had processing times of 2.5 months. So she got her Express Entry application approved just a couple of days ago. And so I don't know, maybe IRCC is resourcing processing applications right now and trying to get through the backlog. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's one thing to kind of take a look at. Igor's going to the check processing times because I know people are probably going to ask. And what it's showing for Express Entry right now is 5 months, which is below their stated service processing standard of 6 months. And what we've been hearing from our clients is yes, indeed, the processing times for Express Entry. If you happen to already have an ITA and have your EAPR filed a few months ago, you are in a good position, but for people who are still waiting, it's tough right now.
Yeah. Alicia, let's welcome some more people. So we have Len48D saying hello, watching us from London. And then we have Amy from, we don't know where from, but hello, Amy. We have Hassan Haidar from Lebanon. We have Binod watching us on LinkedIn. And let's see, who else do we have? We have Patel watching from India. Hello, Patel. Who else do we have here? And then we have people asking questions. And guys, this will be a little bit shorter live Q&A. It will be around like 30 minutes. So you have very limited time to ask your valuable questions. So send them over in the chat. So let's see. Let's start with the first question first. Oh, actually, Alicia, one thing that I
Mhm.
wanted to share with all of our clients, we had a recent success with approved application that was bound to be refused for misrep, and
Mm.
it was a very successful application. We've saved our client, and I don't know into how much detail I should go, but basically, the client used a unregulated consultant who submitted an application, and that application got refused, but the consultant did not inform the client about the refusal and secretly submitted another application. And then a couple of years later, IRCC came back saying that the client did not disclose his all prior refusals, and the guy just didn't know that there was any refusal. So he started investigating and discovered that there actually was a refusal that he didn't even know about. And so we had to explain that all to RCC, and luckily the guy received the um, passport request for his immigration visa. And so
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
very positive story. Just wanted to share
Yeah.
with our viewers. So if you have any challenges in your immigration situation, consider reaching out for professional help before it's too late.
Yeah. And Igor, that's a really good point because If you have used a consultant and or an unregulated agent and they have done things on your file that you don't know about or submitted an application that you don't know about, that can come back and bite you later on whenever you try to do a renewal application or a new work permit or applying for a study permit or a PGWP application. If you don't know about a refusal because some unregulated agent filed things without your knowledge, immigration's going to say that you misrepresented because you are responsible for whoever you give access to on your file. And that's one of the things that I really like about the way that our firm operates is we don't take over people's files. We are properly authorized to give legal advice. We are lawyers. We will provide you a letter to that effect. But you maintain full control of your application. And so we are there to support you and to provide proper advice, but we never rob you of your ability to understand what's going on with your own application. You know what's going on, you're in control of what's going on, and you're never going to be in a situation where, things are happening behind your back. So
Exactly.
be careful about that. That is a very good point, and make sure that you're getting proper advice.
Yeah. And you may go to our website and click about us and our approach, and you will read more about how our firm functions. And at the bottom, you see here, you maintain full control of your own password and your application. And actually, speaking on that note, as I communicate more with Ukrainian nationals right now who are thinking about applying for permanent residence, lots of them don't have access to their account, which was used to submit their QED application. And you have to keep the same information like the information consistent in between your applications. And if the representative submitted something that you were not aware of, later it come back and haunt you when you apply for permanent residence, for citizenship, regardless. This mismatch will find you. So you
Yeah,
want to be sure that you are the only person who controls what's included in your application.
yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely.
So that was a good story. Glad that we have a success on this file, but let's move on to questions. So Amara is asking, when PR is obtained through express entry, could you please give a couple of circumstances under which one can reasonably move to Quebec to work without a fear of breaching immigration rule or misrepresentation?
hmm And this is one that comes up often, and this is one where you've got to be very, very careful. And Amara, I can't, of course, give you advice because this is just a live Q&A. It's immigration information, but it's not advice. But as a general rule, keep in mind that when you were doing your express entry application, you had to certify that you had an intent to live in any province other than the province of Quebec. So that was one of the things that you told the Canadian government in order to get your permanent residency, because you are not eligible for express entry if you live in Quebec. Quebec has its own system of immigration. So it's very important that you not be in a situation where you're misrepresenting your intention. And that's something that immigration authorities can double check when you go to file your PR card application renewal or when you go to apply for citizenship. So be very careful that you are properly following through with your intention not to live in Quebec, any province other than Quebec. And this is even more important if you happen to have express entry with a PNP nomination, right? So in circumstances where you actually had a provincial nomination, then it's even more important because not only were you telling the federal government that you were not going to live in Quebec, you also were telling a provincial government you were going to live in their province. So there's even more of a risk that they might say that you've misrepresented your intention. If you have honest to goodness tried for a number of hopefully months, if not years, to make a go of it in a province other than Quebec, and eventually you have some sort of job opportunity after you've already received your permanent residence and you're looking at moving to Quebec, well, there are circumstances where you can argue, look, I did my best. I had a proper intention to live in that first province, and I spent a year there. I tried to find a job. I had a residence there, and eventually I took a job opportunity outside of that province and moved to Quebec. And that might be a reasonable argument, but it really depends on you proving that you did have a proper intention to make a real go of it in that first province.
Yeah. All right, Alicia, let's move on to the next question from Monsoon. he says that he's a Canadian citizen and he has a sister who has congenital deafness and cannot give any components of IELTS. She would want to join him for a good life in Canada. Any suggestion? She already has a visitor visa.
Mm-hmm. And I think Monsoon Winter, I think we've talked a few times about, yes, there are some ways that certain aspects of IELTS can be modified if people have a disability. But if that's not going to help for your sister, then, I can't give advice here without knowing more about her education, her number of years of experience, whether she might be eligible to apply for a certain category of work permit. So I'd urge you to book a consultation so that we can discuss your situation in particular. But I mean, in general, sometimes people can come as a student if they don't have those IELTS exam results, if they have other forms of language test results that will allow them to be accepted into a Canadian study permit program. I don't know what her background and education are, but maybe it might be a pathway to look at coming under a study permit where she can gain some experience in Canada. Hopefully, it's a PGWP eligible program at least 2 years in duration so that she's eligible for that 3-year PGWP and can get some Canadian work experience. So those are some of the pathways that people use if they're looking to set themselves up for having a better pathway towards PR in the future.
And Alicia, what about the sponsorship for an orphaned sibling? If you don't have
Yeah.
relatives here in Canada and your sister is an orphan, you can potentially include her in the sponsorship application. But there are very strict requirements.
Yeah. So unfortunately, generally, you can't sponsor a sibling, right? You're not eligible to sponsor a brother or a sister. It's only if you have an orphaned sibling. So both parents are dead, you've got death certificates, you're able to prove that your sibling is an orphan and they are under the age of 18. So that is usually the only circumstance that you would be able to sponsor a sibling. If they are orphaned, you can prove it and they're under the age of 18.
Yeah. And Monsoon, I wanted to share my screen and show you if you look for, if you just go to Google and type IELTS hearing or speaking difficulties, it should take you to this page where you can learn more how IELTS can be um, adjusted depending on your sister's um, disability. So take a look at that and it might help you make a decision how to proceed forward. All right, let's move on to the next question. This one is good. What happens after you book a consult, Alicia?
So I guess it depends on what stage in the consultation process you're at, but you can go to our website. So if you want to talk with us, we are a law firm. You can go to the website, you can book a consultation, you can say speak to a lawyer, you can choose your time for those consult spots, either with Mark, myself, Igor. There's a 25-minute consult or a 50-minute consult, and then we will reach out to you and you will complete that intake form so you can tell us a little bit about your situation. You've got to upload a form of photo ID so that we can comply with the Law Society rules in terms of making sure that you are who you say you are. And then we have a consult. So we will reach out to you, we'll get on a video call, and you have 25 minutes to ask your questions so that we can try to provide as much advice as possible. And then if there's something where you require ongoing assistance, like if you want us to help with your express entry profile review, or if you have an ITA that you need to get submitted, then for sure you can hire us. We've got our fees on our website, and you can take a look to see what our legal fees are for retaining us to assist you. And again, we don't take over your passwords or your application, but we work collaboratively with you one-on-one to make sure that all your questions are answered and you're confident that you're submitting the best application you can.
We have a question about Atlantic Immigration Program. Alicia, do we have lots of clients applying to the program?
So the Atlantic Immigration Program it's a good program. It's one that they're really trying to promote, and the Atlantic provinces want to have people immigrate and stay in the Maritimes. And so that is one that is fairly popular. It's very, very specific. It really depends on which program you're looking at and making sure that you have usually an employer to support you as part of that program. So that's a big question, Len. There's lots going on there. It really depends on what you're looking at in terms of which aspect of the Atlantic immigration program are you interested in and what your qualifications are. So AIP has information online. You can go and review it there. But if you need to have some specific advice, then make sure to reach out and discuss your particular circumstances in more detail.
All right. Ifsak is asking, he has 3 variations of name in expired passports, but his current documents, like IELTS, CCA, passport, all have the current name. And what should he do to avoid the
Yeah.
conflict?
So, Igor, anything that says, what should I do is book a consult, right? I can't give particular advice. I can say, in general, a lot of people have variations of their name, and it is very important for the OINP and for any sort of federal IRCC program. When that question comes up on a form, have you ever used any other variation of your name, even if it's an alias? Be really careful. Go back and double check. What does your birth certificate say? What does your first passport say? What does your renewed passport say? What does your marriage certificate say? What do your school documents say? If they say different things, then you need to say, yes, I have used different variations of my name. You need to explain those different variations of your name. And usually, what I do when I work with my clients is we have a very detailed letter of explanation. And we're going to outline exactly which name is used on what document, why, how, and who you are, how you can prove who you say you are, so that that is consistent on your immigration applications. It's also important when immigration goes to do their background and security checks because they want to make sure that that person is the right person.
Yeah. Okay. Amy is clarifying. She's watching from Alberta. So, welcome, Amy. Alicia, here's the question about H-1B, and I think we got a lot of these.
Mhm.
What is the validity on the letter of introduction? And is that the validity date of the work permit? Um,
Mhm. And this can be applicable to many immigration situations as well. It's not just the H-1B work permit holders, it's anybody who's applied for an outside Canada work permit or a study permit or anything else where there's a visa requirement. So as soon as you have a visa requirement, keep in mind that you've done an online application. Immigration normally will send you a letter of approval. So they will say, congratulations, we are going to accept your application. Please send us your passport. And then people will send their passport. They'll get the counterfoil visa in their passport. And then they actually have to travel to Canada in order to be issued their work permit or study permit or the document itself. So that visa counterfoil in your passport is only the ability to travel to Canada. When you get that visa counterfoil, it will say it has a validity period on there. So it's normally a number of months, unless your passport is about to expire really soon, and then it's normally tied to the expiry date of your passport. But you have that amount of time to travel to Canada. The visa is what allows you to travel to Canada, but it isn't the validity of your work permit itself. The work permit is only issued once you actually show up at a port of entry and you talk to an officer and they decide to actually issue you that work permit. This is when they could change their mind, right? If circumstances have changed or you're no longer eligible for the category that you applied for, it's really important that you're properly prepared, that you've brought the documentation, and that everything is still complete and correct and honest when you interview with that officer, because they have the final decision on whether they issue you the work permit. When they issue you that work permit at the port of entry, it should then be valid for the entire 3-year period if you're looking at that H-1B open work permit, as long as your passport is also valid for the full 3 years.
yeah, Alicia, and I think TRTT clarified that his H-1B expired in December 2023, and then the letter of introduction is until December 2024. So this sounds more like this person would need to book a consult so that we can take a look at their individual situation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
overall, we gave the answer. We also have a thank you from Anapotips Design. And let's scroll back and just take a look at those questions that I've skipped. Okay, I think this question was asked last time during the previous live Q&A, or let me see. No, it's not this one. It's this one from the same person. Sir Fraz is asking, claiming points for 2 years of Canadian work experience. went to his home country for 40 days, and should he mention his home address for that period or Canadian address? I would recommend that you include it in your travel history and just show that you went to your home country, because you did not establish a habitual residence in that country. So that would be a temporary address.
Yeah, and there's a number of ways to deal with this on your express entry applications. So eh, it really depends on the length of time and whether you also have a home in your home country or an residence in your home country. So be careful to be honest and complete and correct, right? So if your address history needs to list that as the place where you physically were because it was a long enough period, 40 days might be a long enough period. It depends if you were staying in a hotel or if you have a home that you go back to when you go back to your home country. But for sure listed in your travel history. So make sure that it's clear that this is the address where you were, that's where you were physically present, because it can make a difference in terms of when you need to provide your police certificate clearances.
Right. Tersur is watching us from Nigeria, and we have a question from Image Magician. Oh my God, that's a wonderful name. So this person says he got his H-1B open work permit, now looking for Canadian IT jobs. Applied for a dozen weeks ago, and haven't heard back anything. Is it an expected outcome of this application process? And I think it is.
Yeah, so keep at it, right? There are a number of different job sites where you can go to look for job opportunities in Canada. I usually recommend that people, at a minimum, start with the job bank because it is Canadian government, it's free, it's national in scope, and you can sign up for what's called a job match. And you can go there and you can actually get a plus account. So as soon as you have a work permit in Canada, and as soon as you have a social insurance number, you can go and sign up for that plus account, which will allow you to have your resume through the job bank. Employers will be able to see your profile and match to your profile. And the reason that that's helpful is that some Canadian employers are looking for workers and they think they have to go get an LMIA because they can't find somebody that they need in Canada. And if you are advertising as an employer for an LMIA, you have to take a look at everybody that you're matched with within the first 30 days. And so you have a better chance at trying to find a job if employers are matching with you and inviting you to apply. They don't have to hire you if you're not a Canadian permanent resident, if you just have work permit status, but some of them might. It's good for them to know that you're qualified and you meet their criteria. So keep at it, keep trying job bank, try job match, make sure to keep putting your resume out there and networking with people who are in Canada who are in the industry, and hopefully you will be able to find a job. But it also depends which province you're trying to find a job in, right? Some of those job markets are a little bit tighter than others, so it might require you looking in a different province or a different city.
Yeah. And Alicia, I have to be honest, myself as an immigrant, I find Canadian job search process ridiculous, because unless you have someone who would recommend you and say a word for you or bring your resume to an HR manager,
Yeah.
it's so unlikely that someone will ever respond to your email. I have so many friends applying for legal professions or any kind of professions in general, and they send hundreds of those resumes. And every once in a while, someone might open their email and take a look at their resume. So the best way to actually look for jobs is by networking. And networking in Canada is a huge thing,
Yeah.
which I hate personally. I hate networking. I feel it's more like I need something from someone, and I'm just gonna bug them and ask them questions that it feels so mercenary, like so ego driven, and I just hate networking, but you just have to get used to it. You cannot get around without it. Yeah. All right. Just expressed a little of my frustration with Canadian job search process. Forgive me for that. But Masood Han is asking, during the express entry, proof of funds currency is fluctuating due to inflation. What should he do?
hmm And this is something that I always tell people is be careful about exchange rates. When you're looking at those minimum required settlement funds, their Canadian equivalent dollars. And if you have a currency where that exchange rate is fluctuating quite a bit, then you've got to be really careful to make sure that your settlement fund amount doesn't dip below the Canadian equivalent, because IRCC is pretty ruthless for express entry, and they will say, too bad, you no longer meet that minimum settlement fund requirement. So always have a buffer, always have, a few hundred extra dollars in there to deal with that fluctuating exchange rate, or I guess it depends on your currency equivalency, but always make sure that you're well above the Canadian equivalent so that you can deal with things like dips in currency exchange rates, or, inflation and that money being worth less than it used to be.
Yeah. I know this is the case for Lebanon. Like the inflation is just through the roof, and it's
Yeah.
really hard for people to maintain their proof of funds.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to the next one. And guys, we will wrap in about like 3 to 4 minutes. So, your last chance to ask the good question, and we scan through all the questions. There are just so many questions that we can go through. So, we pick the best, the most interesting, considering that we have limited time. All right, so this one is from Hassan, and he says his wife is a primary applicant. She gets paid in cash, and and I understand she is insured through his work, because Hassan has a better health plan. What will that be a problem since she doesn't pay tax when he pays all of the required taxes? And it really comes down to whether you talking about Canadian experience or foreign experience, because tax documents are just one way to prove that you have that work experience. And the only document that you would need to prove your work experience technically is the reference letter, but you can provide more documents such as your pay slips and tax documents. You're not mandatorily required to provide tax documents for foreign work experience, but if it's a Canadian work experience and you have unauthorized work, oh, you have a problem.
Yeah, be really, really careful. I mean, there should be no circumstance in Canada where you're getting paid in cash and there's no taxes being properly filed, because that's going to be an issue in terms of tax avoidance. Canadian companies have to make sure that they're properly paying their employees, and in most circumstances, they have remittances that they have to make. So they have deductions that they have to make for Canada Pension Plan or health insurance that have to be taken off of the paycheck right before it actually is delivered to the employee. And then, of course, they have to report to Canada Revenue Agency and then file basically at the end of every year a T4 statement showing exactly how much they've paid their employees. And it has to be what they said they were going to pay their employees under a contract or under an employment agreement with them. So it's very important that if you're looking at Canadian work, that you make sure that your Canadian employer is properly paying you and proving that they're paying you. But as Igor said, if you're looking at foreign work experience, countries around the world have all sorts of rules, but it's a matter of you or your wife as the principal applicant having the onus of proof. So if she can't prove that she was actually paid for a high skilled job, IRCC is not going to give her points for that job.
And Alicia, here probably I will share my screen and show this paragraph, that the person who has worked in Canada without authorization has failed to comply with subsection of the IRPA, and on that basis could be found inadmissible. So you have a big problem if you have unauthorized work in Canada. So book a consult. We have this question. Alicia, are you in Trinidad?
Um, Len, I have family who's Trinidadian, so I have all sorts of roots throughout the world, and some of my relatives are Trinidadian, yes.
Cool. All right. Guntas is asking the question, and it's probably going to be our last one. Why there are no draws? Any thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, and Guntis, we started talking about this a little bit at the very beginning of the live stream. No draws. It's been a month. This is a long time for not having draws. The only thing I can think is that they are working on things in the background and they're trying to get through the backlog, because we have heard that lots of clients are getting their PR finalized right now. So it does seem that processing is moving on the back end, but it is concerning when they don't have any intakes anymore, because as you know, those CRS points are probably going through the roof, right? All those applicants who are sitting in there now who provinces are still nominating people, and so now a bunch of people have PNP nominations. So there's quite a few people who are going to be above the 600 mark. So it really depends when the next draw is going to be, whether it's going to be a category specific draw, whether it's going to be a PNP or a no program specified. So, I mean, I really wish that the immigration department would provide some sort of consistency and clarity and predictability, because it's only fair.
Yeah, and I think about all of those scores and all of those people who are really well educated, have
Mhm.
wonderful work experience in Canada and foreign work experience, young, know English, and still cannot qualify.
Yeah.
I would not be able to move to Canada if I was trying to apply right now. And I'm thinking, if you don't have Canadian education and Canadian work experience, you don't have a chance. But at this time, they also trying to crack down on international students, which is bizarre. And I think it just brings this imbalance to the system. Um, like, how do you get those scores if you don't study in Canada? But how do you study in Canada if they don't want you here? And what happens after the students are not allowed in Canada in such numbers? Who's
Yeah.
going to work in those companies? Part-time students, like part-time workers. What's going to happen to the country? So lots of questions, not too many answers, and maybe that's going to be a subject of discussion for another live Q&A. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll have to wrap it up. It was a great live Q&A, very short one. So sorry for those people whose questions we didn't answer. We'll see you on Wednesday next week and on Thursday next week as well. So subscribe to the channel if you're not, and have a good day, everyone.